That's my seat now. Move it, old man. The words cracked across the town hall like the snap of a whip, loud, sharp, and filled with the kind of fury that turns every head. The warm hum of conversation died in an instant, leaving only the echo of disrespect hanging heavy in the air. Derek Walsh loomed over Lemmy Rogers, his face red with frustration, hands clenched at his sides. He had returned from the restroom, where he'd stepped away after 45 long minutes of waiting, only to find the spot he'd marked in his mind now taken. The sight of Lemmy, seated where he believed he had claim, had tipped his simmering temper to the boil. Lemmy looked up slowly, steady, despite the storm directed at him. His frame was slight with age, his posture upright through sheer will, his hands resting calmly on the handle of the cane that helped ease the strain of his injured shin. A wound earned in service, a scar that never quite stopped aching on cold mornings. His cap, marked Veteran, United States Army, shaded eyes that held no fear, only the quiet dignity of a man who had seen worse than a young man's tantrum. "I didn't mean to take anyone's place," Lemmy said, his voice low, respectful. "If I'd known, I'd have left it." But Derek wasn't listening. His anger, stoked by the long wait, by the day's small frustrations, burned hot. His voice rose, filling the hall. "I don't care what you meant. That was mine. You had no right." The town hall seemed to shrink around the moment. Neighbors froze, unsure, unwilling. A child clutched his mother's hand. A man near the aisle shook his head, silent. And at the back, the door opened quietly. The first pair of boots crossed the threshold, unseen, but not for long. The day had dawned cool and clear, the sky washed clean by overnight rain that left the air crisp and sweet. Lemmy Rogers rose early, as he always did, his small home quiet, except for the creak of floorboards that had borne his careful steps for decades. The morning light spilled through the curtains, softening the edges of the room where photographs lined the mantel. A life lived with purpose, a family raised, a wife missed more with each passing year. He moved through his morning with deliberate care. The simple act of dressing was done with the same quiet pride that had shaped all his days. A pressed shirt, sleeves buttoned despite the stiffness in his fingers. A cardigan, its hem tugged straight. His shoes, polished the night before, bore the soft shine of a man who still believed in respect for occasion. His cap, embroidered with Veteran, United States Army, rested on its peg by the door. He took it down gently, running a thumb along the brim, as if the touch connected him to all it stood for. The cane he reached for next was as much a part of him as the scar that ran down his shin, a mark left by duty long ago when an explosion on foreign soil had torn through the night and through him. The pain had never fully left, but neither had his quiet resolve. Before leaving, Lemmy paused at the small table beneath the window, where a vase of wildflowers stood fresh from his garden. Beside it, a frame held the image of his wife, the steady gaze that had anchored him in war and in peace. "Wish me luck, love," he murmured. "Town hall's no place for the likes of me, but I promised I'd show my face." He stepped out into the morning, the cane clicking softly on the walkway, the air cool against his skin. Along the route to the town hall, neighbors waved from porches, shopkeepers tipped their hats, not out of habit, but out of genuine regard for a man who had always been there when it mattered. Lemmy was the one who came in the blackouts, flashlight in hand, checking on those too frail to call for help. The one who shoveled the walkway of the widow down the street before she could rise. The one who organized the supply drives when the storm took the power and the town huddled in the dark. He was a shield when the town needed one, a steady hand in times of strain. And age had not lessened him. The years had lined his face, slowed his step, but they had not touched his honor. Inside the town hall, he had taken a seat at the end of the pew, the first empty space he'd found after making his way down the aisle, legs weary from the walk. He had meant no harm, claimed no right beyond what was offered. And then came the voice, sharp, bitter, cutting through the peace of the moment. Derek Walsh's face flushed darker, the anger that had simmered during his long, impatient wait boiling over, as if this single moment justified all of it. His hands clenched at his sides, his shoulders hunched forward, his posture that of a man itching for a fight where none should exist. He glared at Lemmy, his voice rising again so all could hear. "You heard me! That was my seat! I've been standing for 45 damn minutes while this circus drags on. And the second I take a breath, you swoop in and take what's mine?" The words spilled out harsh and fast, not seeking understanding, only release. His finger jabbed toward Lemmy's chest, the gesture sharp, too close, violating the quiet dignity of the older man's space. Lemmy straightened as much as he could, both hands resting lightly on the cane across his lap. His voice, when it came, was as steady as the line of his back, calm in the face of Derek's storm. "I didn't see any sign, son. Didn't mean to trouble you." But Derek wasn't interested in reason. His frustration, with the meeting, the wait, the day itself, found its target, and it was Lemmy. "Yeah, sure. Always someone else's fault," Derek sneered. His eyes swept the room, as if daring anyone to challenge him, as if waiting for approval that would never come. The town hall had gone still. The soft scrape of shoes on wood, the rustle of paper, the low hum of whispered greetings, all gone now, swallowed by the weight of what was unfolding. Near the front, an elderly woman folded her hands tight in her lap, her knuckles white. A father shifted uneasily, drawing his young son closer, shielding him from the ugliness of the moment. An old friend of Lemmy's, seated at the far end of the bench, opened his mouth to speak, but the words caught in his throat, drowned by the tension thick in the air. Derek moved closer, his foot knocking against Lemmy's cane, upsetting its balance. As Lemmy's cane wobbled from Derek's careless bump, instinct took over. His hand shot out, not to strike, not to accuse, but simply to steady himself. His fingers caught the sleeve of Derek's shirt, a light grip born of the sudden need to keep from falling. But to Derek, blinded by anger and pride, that touch felt like an affront. His face darkened further. His voice snapped louder than before so the whole room heard. "Don't you lay hands on me, old man." The words echoed through the town hall, sharper than any shout that had come before, a crack of thunder that left the air thick and stifling. Lemmy let go at once, hands raised slightly, as if to show his innocence, his meaning. But Derek saw only what his fury allowed. And at the back of the hall, the sound of boots crossing the threshold grew louder, steady, purposeful, drawing near. For a breath, the town hall seemed to vanish. The angry voice, the watching eyes, the weight of Derek's scorn faded behind Lemmy's gaze as memory rose unbidden, carried on the tide of a moment too familiar in its shape. He was young again. The heat of that other hall filled his mind, the air thick with smoke, the sound of boots on scorched earth. The year was 1953, a world away, but the memory clear as glass. A transport truck, wrecked and burning, its cargo of men caught in the blaze. Lemmy's own leg torn, his shin bleeding through shredded cloth, but his arms strong still. He'd pulled them out, one by one, through the flames, through the smoke, through the roar of a fire that seemed to want to take them all. He remembered the weight of those bodies, brothers in arms, no longer able to stand for themselves. The feel of their jackets beneath his hands, the burn of heat on his face, the scream of metal giving way as the truck collapsed behind him. And he remembered the hall after, a hall much like this one, where his name was read aloud, where he stood not for medals, but to honor those who hadn't made it. The faces came back to him now. Young men's faces, men who had always made room, no matter how tight the space, who had shared water, shelter, hope, men who would have given their last seat to another, without needing to be asked. The memory ached as much as his old wound, deep, silent, and enduring. The present returned slowly, the smell of varnished wood, the light through tall windows, the hush that had fallen in the room. He felt the roughness of Derek's sleeve as his fingers released it, felt his own heart steadying after the near fall. Derek's words rang in his ears, sharp and undeserved, but Lemmy did not let anger rise. His hands lowered, resting once more on his cane, his shoulders set with quiet resolve. And in that space, that hush heavy with tension, the boots drew closer. The first Marine moved fully into the room, his gaze sweeping the scene, taking in more than just what was visible. Change had come through the door. The reckoning had begun. The hush inside the town hall held, thick and uneasy, as if even the walls felt the wrongness of what had passed. The weight of Derek's voice, the bitterness of his scorn, still hung in the air. But now, another sound joined it. Soft at first, but growing clearer with each step. The door at the back of the hall creaked open fully, admitting a wash of light and the measured, steady beat of boots on old wood. One by one they entered, men in uniform, Marines, 20 in all. Their jackets crisp, their bearing proud, but without swagger. They did not march in with bluster, nor with noise. They came as those who understood the weight of silence, of presence. The first Marine paused just inside the door, his gaze sweeping the hall. He took in the scene with eyes that missed nothing. Lemmy, seated, steady despite what had come. Derek still standing, the heat of his outburst cooling now beneath the growing weight of watchful eyes. The faces of the townsfolk, some shamed by their silence, some relieved at the arrival of those who could give voice to what their hearts knew. Then the others followed, filling the back of the room, the sides, standing where they could, not blocking, not crowding, but making it clear. They were here. They had seen, and they would not look away. They spoke no word. They didn't need to. Their presence filled the space with something stronger than rebuke, with honor reclaimed. The room felt different now. The tension still lingered, but beneath it ran a current of hope, of rightness returning. Mothers breathed easier. Fathers straightened. Elders nodded slightly in silent thanks. And Derek felt it too. The heat that had fueled him moments ago gave way to the cold realization that he stood alone, exposed. The defiance in his posture began to waver, his eyes darting from face to face, looking for support that would not come. And then came that feeling, the one a man knows in his bones when outnumbered by authority, when the tide has turned and he stands on the wrong side of it. His gut clenched, tight and cold, a hollow ache where rage had burned only moments before. His breath grew shallow, his chest tight, each second dragging heavy, crashing down on him like a weight he could no longer bear. The heat of anger and impatience drained from him, replaced by the cold seat of unpleasant surprise, the creeping, bitter knowledge that he had misstepped, and that what came next was beyond his control. The Marines waited, not for orders, not for a signal. They waited because that is what men of honor do. They stand, they witness, they let the weight of their presence speak what words cannot. And in that waiting, the room braced for what would come next. The silence in the town hall was complete now, filled only by the quiet breath of those watching, the faint creak of wooden benches as people shifted, leaning forward, waiting. Outside, the breeze stirred the flag that hung above the entrance, its fabric snapping softly against the frame, a sound that seemed to mark the turning of the moment. One Marine stepped forward from the line, Sergeant Edward Cruz, a man whose posture spoke of years lived in service, and whose eyes carried the steady weight of a soul unwilling to abide injustice, no matter where it came from. Superior or civilian, wrong was wrong in his book, as his grandmother had taught him when he was just a boy. Always stand for what's right, Edward. No one else might. Those words had guided him in every corner of his life. His uniform was neat but not new, his boots worn smooth by miles of honest ground. He did not rush, nor did he pause for effect. He simply came to stand beside Lemmy, between the old soldier and the man who had shamed him. His voice, when it came, was low, steady, meant for all to hear but offered without threat. That seat belongs to him. The words were simple, but they carried the weight of history, the kind that comes when one who serves speaks on behalf of another who has served, and the truth of it fills the room. The sergeant's gaze fixed on Derek, not hard, not angry, but unblinking. A gaze that saw through the layers of pride and excuse, down to the smallness of what Derek's anger had truly been. "And so does our respect," the Marine added, softer now, but no less firm. The room stirred. A murmur of agreement, the nods of heads once bowed in shame, the easing of tension that comes when justice begins to speak. Derek swallowed hard, his throat dry, his mind racing for words that wouldn't come. The anger that had fueled him had fled, leaving only the bitter hollow of regret too late realized. He opened his mouth, but no defense would form, no excuse strong enough to hold against the tide of truth that filled the hall. "I didn't mean," he began, but the words died on his lips, choked by the weight of the moment. The Marine didn't reply with words. He simply waited, as did the room, as did Lemmy, steady, dignified, watching with the quiet grace that had always marked him. And at last, Derek moved, not with defiance, not with pride. The hush of the room compressed Derek, as if the very air had grown heavy, thick with the judgment of all who bore silent witness. The silence itself became loud, louder than any scolding could have been, louder than any shouted rebuke. It rang in his ears, filled his chest, made his skin prickle with the shame of it. He wanted to vanish, to melt into the floor, to slip away unseen. But he was bound by the business that had brought him here, by the duty he still had to endure, forced to stand and chew whatever bitter gum fate had placed in his mouth that morning. The Marines did not cheer, the room did not clap. They simply watched, bearing witness as dignity was restored. And the town hall seemed to breathe again, as if the building itself had exhaled. The room felt different now. The tension that had coiled tight around every soul inside the town hall had eased, like a storm's passing, leaving the air clearer, the weight lifted. The Marines remained at their posts, not rigid, not showy, but steady, as if the very walls leaned on their presence. The townsfolk breathed again, small sounds returning. The soft rustle of papers, the creak of a bench as an elderly man shifted with relief, a child's quiet whisper asking a parent if things were all right now. Sergeant Edward Cruz offered Lemmy a nod. Not dramatic, not for show, but the kind of nod that passes between men who understand one another without need for words. His voice, when it came, was low, meant for Lemmy alone. "Let me help you, sir." Lemmy, steadying his cane, accepted the hand offered without hesitation. Cruz's grip was firm, respectful, no hint of pity in it, only shared strength. Together they eased Lemmy back into his rightful place, where he settled with quiet dignity, his shoulders squaring once more beneath the weight of his years, but no longer beneath the weight of shame. One by one, the Marines nearest the aisle stepped forward, forming a quiet guard at either end of the bench, as if to mark the space with the seal of honor. They stood at ease, but there was nothing casual in their bearing. It was a silent promise. No one would take from this man again. Across the room, heads nodded, eyes met in silent understanding. The town meeting resumed at last, but it did so on firmer ground. The hall felt changed, steadier, stronger, as though the very timbers had drawn in the lesson of what had passed. Derek, meanwhile, shrank into his place, his earlier fury now a bitter taste at the back of his throat, his thoughts no longer of pride or rights or wrongs, but of how he would face the day beyond these walls. And so the business of the town moved on, but those who had gathered would carry this moment with them, a reminder of what dignity looks like, of what it means to stand when it matters. When the last motion of the meeting was called and the room began to empty, the light outside had softened, the golden hush of late afternoon spilling through the tall windows, catching in the dust motes that danced in the air. The business of the town had been seen to, but the memory of what had passed would linger far longer than the matters discussed that day. Lemmy Rogers rose slowly, the ache in his shin a familiar companion, but the weight of the morning's injustice eased by what had followed. His cane found its place beneath his hand, but it was the hand of Sergeant Edward Cruz that steadied him first, firm, respectful, offering support without taking dignity. The Marines flanked him as he walked the length of the hall, not as an escort, but as silent witnesses, as brothers in arms, as a wall of quiet honor. The townsfolk stepped aside, not from obligation, but out of reverence, hats in hand, heads bowed in small, private tribute. At the door, Lemmy paused, the breeze catching his jacket, the scent of cut grass and spring dust filling his lungs. His gaze lifted to the flag that stirred above the hall's entrance, its stripes bold against the soft sky. His voice, when it came, was quiet, more to the wind, more to himself, but heard by those who stood near. Respect isn't owed. It's given, and it's earned, by those who remember what it costs. And with that, he stepped out into the fading light, his shadow long on the walk, the town a little stronger for what it had seen that day. Behind him, the door of the hall swung gently shut, the sound of it closing not as an ending, but as a promise kept. Today we remember, always forward. If stories like this resonate with your heart, like and subscribe for more untold moments of honor and kindness. Let us know where you are watching from, and if this moment brought back memories you carry with you. The best way to honor their memory is to keep listening. Click on the suggested video now, and we'll walk together through another untold chapter of courage and sacrifice.